Economic Overview, August 2023 version. My name is Michael Campo. I'm an EVP here at the IMA Financial Group. My role as Director of National Specialty Construction Group here at IMA means that I have the privilege of overseeing our associates that take care of over the 1,500 construction clients throughout the United States. IMA Financial Group is an insurance broker and risk management partner, and we are currently ranked 14th in the United States as the largest retail broker, as ranked by Insurance Journal. Every 2 months, the IMA Construction Specialty Group comes together and looks at the current economic environment for our contractors. We look at the various factors that are available in the marketplace, and we look at our current state of what's going on in the construction economy. We then look to indicators that will give us insights into what we refer to as future state. And we put all that in pieces of the puzzle on the table to form a picture that helps us glean what does it mean. And when we look at it from what does it mean, we look at it from what does it mean for our construction clients from a risk and insurance viewpoint. And so we view the construction economy as the last car on a car for a roller coaster, meaning that the general economy is the first car. And so there are times when the general economy is going down, but yet the construction economy is still seeing robust activity. This is natural given the lag time between when a project starts, the continued spending until the project ends. Conversely, there are times when the overall economy is on the upswing, but yet the construction economy is still lagging behind and is on a decline activity basis. Knowing that where we fit into the overall economy is important because we actually have several cars ahead of us that gives us indications of what maybe the future holds for our construction economy. And those are the factors we look at to try to give us insights as to trends coming up. Our current state is the term we use for what's going on right now. We like to look at the current state first to get an idea of the activity and where that activity occurs and what does that activity currently mean for us before we look at the future indications. The first thing we look at is what we call the construction spending tree. So we have total spending at the top, but since contractors play in different sectors of the economy, it's not enough to say that total spending is increasing. That doesn't really give any insights to at the individual level. So what we'd like to do is look at total spending and break that out into several components. So the first thing, we take total spending and we look at non-residential and residential construction. And then we take non-residential and we break that out between private spending and public spending. And we take the residential and we look at single family and we look at multi. Sometimes multifamily is referred to as commercial, definitely from an insurance viewpoint. And so it's important that we break that out. And so just looking at the construction spending tree, we see non-residential construction in June 2022 at $907 billion. And here we are in June 2023 with a spend rate of over $1 trillion. And if we conversely look at the residential spending, we are down from where we were in June 2022. And we'll look at that trend line coming up in the next few slides. The other trend that we'll point out is that single family construction, no surprise, as that data is actually captured in the overall economic news. But you'll see that multifamily is increasing, even though single family is decreasing. Again, should not be a surprise, but seeing the data helps. And so if we look at total construction spending for the last 3 years, this data is provided to us by the Federal Reserve, specifically the St. Louis database. We look at the fact that annual rate of construction is up 3.5% over last year, and is on an upward swing and has been, except for the little decline in late 2022. The residential spending breakout, it paints a completely different picture. From its high point of May 2022 to where we are today, we actually have a 10.2 negative growth rate, spending rate, since June of 2022. And so, which would be higher if we went back to its high point back in May. So when we break out total residential spending, we get a different story when we look at multifamily versus single family. Single family has a heavy weight as a percentage of overall residential spending, but it's down 21%. Conversely, multifamily is up 21%. So we have a tale of two different halves going on in the residential spending market. And so if you're a contractor that caters towards private single family, your prospects, and you've known this, your prospects have been decreasing. But if you're a general contractor or specialty trade contractor that works for on multifamily projects, you've enjoyed plenty of opportunity, and to the tune of almost 22% greater this year in spending rate than last year. And so if we look at non-residential versus residential, we get yet even more dichotomy. And so the green graph is the residential, the maroon graph is non-residential, and a couple of things pop out at us. First, back in July of 2022, it was the first time, if you looked at prior to July 2022, you almost got the feeling that residential construction was going to exceed non-residential construction, and that did not bode well for commercial contractors. Although keep in mind about 25% of residential construction is considered multifamily, which could be construed as a project for a commercial contractor. But that all changed in about August of 2022 when residential construction continued a downward slide and non-residential construction continued to grow. And so year over year, as of June of this year, non-residential construction is up 18%. And there is our residential construction showing down 10% for the last 12 months. So total construction may be up 3.5%, but when you break it out between non-residential and residential, you see really two different tracks occurring. If we break down non-residential construction into different components, different sectors of non-residential spending, we see that there are some areas, even within non-residential, that are doing significantly better than other areas. The first one being lodging. Lodging is up in spending at June over June by 20%. And so according to the lodging econometrics, renovation is a large part of the spending. It's on a tear. It's up 38% by project and 37% by room. And so that residential spending, or that non-residential spending for lodging, also incorporates renovation, which is a large part of the spending going on in addition to the ground up. So what does that mean? So it means that if you're a contractor performing renovation work, not just for lodging, but basically any type of renovation work, but definitely for lodging, then there's a coverage on the builder's risk policy that our teams would take a close look at, and that's referred to as damage to existing structure. This is the builder's risk policy will pay for damage to those materials that will become a permanent part of the structure while they're in transit, while they're in a laydown yard. But if you're working in an existing structure, you have the propensity to damage not just the materials that will become part of the permanent structure, but also the permanent structure that was already there. This could be covered through a liability action of the owner coming through to the contractor alleging damage through the liability. But there is a coverage underneath the builder's risk policy that makes that a little bit easier to insure. And so we would encourage our teams, as our clients do renovation work, to take a close look at the damage to existing structure, and we're encouraging you to do that as well. The other, not just related to renovation, but the other coverage that often gets overlooked by contractors when putting in a builder's risk policy is what's referred to as delay and startup cost. So this is not only the additional cost, sometimes referred to as soft costs, that are incurred because of a covered cause of loss, some additional costs that get incurred, maybe getting a redesign, re-permitting, maybe some higher interest rate on the loan because of the timing of the market. But delay and startup limits also cover the lost anticipated business income associated with that project not starting on time. And so when you have projects like lodging, battery plants, EV plants, that sort of nature, where that structure is going to generate a significant amount of business income, we would encourage our teams to get with our clients and to set those limits adequately. So what does the robust spending and lodging mean from a risk and insurance? Well, we think there's some coverage nuances while that project is going up for construction that need to be looked at closely, so that there's no underfunded or accidental self-insurance should something unfortunate occur. The other areas of non-residential spending that we look at that has significant year-over-year increases is highway and street, sewage and water, and some conservation projects. And so from our viewpoint, we believe this is the beginning of seeing some of the congressional spending bills that were passed in the last couple of years that have, either through bureaucracy, design, whatever the delay, financing, qualifying, that are just now starting to show up in the spending numbers in the construction economy. And so what does that mean? Well, with the plethora of congressional spending bills, Congress has taken a close look at the construction economy, construction industry, and the EOC has put forth their strategic enforcement plan, which is really their plan over the next 4 years, and they specifically call out the construction industry for lack of diversity. The thinking being is that, and it's stated in their committee chairs, that trillions of dollars are going to be made available to contractors to build stuff, and those contractors should be embracing Congress's belief of diversity. And so there have been a string of EEO lawsuits and settlements between the EEOC and the construction firms since May of 2022, when Congress has set their sights on the construction industry, and some of these are not small. And so, given the combination of recent activity, which means that the EOC has, before the plan was rolled out, had already set their sights on the construction industry, we would say that our contracting clients should be on high alert. And so it definitely means the EOC is going to be more aggressive. They already are. It's more likely to investigate following the filing of a complaint. They will do unannounced visits if someone does make a complaint, and they're allocating more money for investigations to answer EEOC questions or inquiries from contractor employees. And so it's just a direct result of, again, Congress's belief that there's trillions of dollars out there, and they want to make sure that their social goals are met with that money being spent. And so we have here on this slide, I won't read it to you, but we have on this slide some things that our clients can do to help mitigate the risk of an EEOC complaint or investigation. You can have a complaint, but to keep the EOC from going broader than that one individual complaint. The other thing we would just say, and it's not here on the slide, is that if you do get an EEOC complaint and you do have employer's practice liability insurance, don't walk to your broker or carrier to get that filed. That is notice of an occurrence, and so you do not want to jeopardize coverage for late reporting. It is clearly established that an EEOC claim, complaint, or inquiry meets the definition of what is a potential claim, and we would encourage you to run, don't walk. So speaking of all that public spending, how much is it in relation in the current state of the construction economy? And the red line, again, atop is total construction spending. The blue line is at the bottom of the graph is the public spending. And, a couple of things pop out just looking at this graph. Here we are in June of 2023, and we're, as a percentage of total construction spending, exactly where we were 2 years ago. We had a dip, but again, that spending bills were passed, and we're getting through the permitting and the bureaucracy of the different agencies, and we're starting to see the incoming flows of that money. But if we look at so as a percentage, we get the if we look at the hard dollars, and year over year, we're up 13.5%. So from June of 2022 to June of 2023, we're up 13.5%. This is a number that we at IMA are going to watch very closely. It's our opinion, and I know we're not to the future state or crystal ball part of this discussion, but it's our opinion that these numbers will just increase, that we'll see under construction starts a concern we have that private sector spending will decrease, and the majority of the spending will be from a governmental owner, or definitely funded by a governmental owner. And so that's a future shift in the construction economy that we think we're on the cusp of. Again, looking at projects funded by federal dollars, not only has the EEOC back in May of 2022 set their sights on the construction industry in anticipation of those dollars, but now that those bills have passed, more bills and or agency actions are taking place as a protective safeguard or the advancement of certain social goals of the government. One of which is Build America, Buy America. So this is part of the $1.2 trillion Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed in 2021, but it applies to all federally funded infrastructure projects. And so basically it says, look, there are certain materials that you need to buy in America. You could see here on the slide some of the requirements. 55% of the cost of the components must be fabricated domestically. And it's not all materials. It's not cement. It's not part of that. But it's these materials you see here on the slide. And so what does that mean? Sourcing materials may cost more. And so what we try to keep reminding our construction clients is that builders' risk claims are valued at the time of loss. So if we set a limit at the beginning of the policy and inflation has taken over, and it just and then we suffer property damage and it costs more, we may find ourselves in a situation where we did not set the limits high enough because of the erosion of those limits due to inflation, and because we just failed to realize that the claim is valued at the time of loss. And so we encourage our clients to look at not only what's in their bid, but what they've actually purchased those materials for, but also the anticipation of what inflation would do over the course of the project. The other thing about requiring Build America, Buy America is that sourcing the materials may take longer. And this could result in a micro trend of supply chain issues. And if that's the case, then we run the risk of our builder's risk policy, especially if it's project specific, not being long enough, and we have to ask for an extension. Carriers generally will give one, possibly two extensions, but at some juncture, they deny giving extensions for anything past the original expiration date. A lot of this has to do with reinsurance and other parties being involved meeting the capacity for the policy. It's very expensive if a carrier decides not to extend a builder's risk policy. They have to find another carrier. And so what we encourage our clients to do is to be very conservative on their completion times. And one of the concerns we have with Build America, Buy America as it relates to risk and insurance is that it could again create these micro supply chain issues and trip us up on expiration dates on builder's risk policies. The other thing too is there's just trillions of dollars coming out, and projects are extremely large. You could refer to them as mega projects or just large projects, but to ensure that much value, carrier, it usually takes more than one carrier. This could not be apparent because the lead carrier will go out and get reinsurance behind the scenes, but more and more we're finding that insurance brokers will need to cobble together different capacities to fill out the limits, and that just takes time. And so where time allows, we would encourage our clients to understand that the overabundance of information and the overabundance of time will ultimately lead to the best possible outcome. Also sticking with the public spending, projects funded by federal dollars, just recently the Davis-Bacon Act has been amended. It takes effect October 23rd. I believe the federal government is undergoing seminars now on what it takes to comply. This economic overview is not meant to be a Davis-Bacon update, but just as quickly as possible, let you know that those changes are occurring. It's the main one driving the dominoes is that the Davis-Bacon wage will be set at least of the top 30% of what the top 30% of the workers in the area are being paid. This is a change from the top 50%. So that Davis-Bacon wage will go up, and this will again see everyone's wages go up, and so that also has ramifications as it relates to risk and insurance. People are still climbing through the Davis-Bacon Act 800-page change, and there's some other things in there that give concern to us and maybe the construction clients as well, and that is that the Davis-Bacon Act will now apply to secondary construction sites. And secondary construction sites, really with the advent of more prefab and more modular construction, now those workers, if they qualify as a secondary construction site, as defined in the 800-page proposal, are also subject to higher wages of the top 30% of people getting paid in that area. And then the final rule also requires contractors to pay Davis-Bacon wages to delivery drivers for onset for the time they're on site for delivering of materials. So major changes coming through as it relates to risk and insurance. This will elevate payrolls, which will elevate the workers' compensation premium cost. So when you're bidding a job and it's Davis-Bacon era, just know that your workers' compensation premium will go up just simply because it's a rate times the payroll. Higher labor costs will have an impact on the contract value. It's not dollar for dollar. It doesn't mean that if we pay workers $1 more that our contract value is going to go up $1 more per worker. But there is an impact on the cost of the project, and then that eventually will show up in the overall contract value. And again, it gets back to setting proper limits on the builder's risk. And in the event of there being a claim for property damage during the course of construction, you have to imagine that now the cost, not only to build it, but the cost to repair it also goes up. And so where there are deductibles, and there are deductibles on builder's risk coverages, that will be eaten up a lot quicker. So sticking with non-residential spending, we looked at the highway, sewage, and conservation and development, 20, 24, 29% increases year over year categories. But the big one that pops is manufacturing. And again, this too is related to government CHIPS Act and congressional spending bills. And Construction Dive has done a fabulous job of mapping out where some of these major manufacturing facilities being built are located. You could see here there's parts of the country that just get ignored, but you can see by type and really by amount of dollars being spent in that area where biggest manufacturing facilities, really as a result, again, of that congressional spending bills. One of the things that's not on any of the slides in this presentation and just recently was highlighted by Construction Dive is that these mega projects, they go on for years and in their term gobble up workers. So we'll look at employment, construction employment in a couple more slides, but just know that these mega projects require a concentration of employees, which brings its own management and logistics issues to the table. But that is a trend of where we're seeing concentrated dollars from that public spending, and maybe not even public spending, maybe publicly incentivized spending for some of these manufacturing plants. So what does it mean for mega projects? Well, the ability to bond large projects become increasingly important. And in our mind, this reduces the number of contractors eligible to compete for the projects, and it creates a barrier of entry. So those large EPC contractors who have the ability to bond, have the ability to manage $1 billion plus, $10 billion plus, $25 billion plus projects, those are far and few between. And so those dollars are finding their way through them and then down to the specialty contractors. Larger projects tend to have longer construction times. And when there's longer construction times, the impact of weather, it increases the susceptibility of the negative impact of weather. This is not just water. This could be heat as well. And so the insurance industry has responded in its infancy with parametric insurance. And we're starting to see more and more of our contractors look at this very unique coverage to address whether the financial costs due to the impact of weather. Again, it's not just wind, it's not just water. Heat, again, is a trigger that can be insured against. And then the other thing we would just draw attention to on these larger projects, whether they're federally funded or not, but also because alternative project delivery is increasing, it increases the contributory at some juncture, whatever you want to call it, IPD, design build, progressive design build, whatever tag you want to put on it. There's just increasing design responsibility on the contractor. And our fear is that we're not looking, or contractors are not looking at their limits on their professional liability, given the fact that these projects just seemingly overnight have just started to balloon in contract value. And you can imagine that if there was a design, and not just contractors, professionals, not just limited to design, but if there was a professional allegation, that the financial consequences associated will be magnified just due to the size of the project. And so we're encouraging our teams and our contractors to look at their limits for adequacy. Let's stay in our current state and look at construction employment. Just a couple of things pop out. Residential, non-residential construction is up, employment is up 6% over where it was a year ago. We have darn near 8 million construction workers working in the United States in July of this year. Residential is adding, but at a very slow rate. But really, if you look at the far right-hand side with the two green ovals, construction wages are up 5.5% over where they were a month ago. They're higher than they are in private industries. And if you look at average weekly hours, significantly, contractors are working more per week than all other private industries. And so this trend has been going on really since post-COVID, prior to COVID, and then there was a stoppage, and then post-COVID. And so what you have is you have workers working longer hours, and that eventually takes a toll on the body. And so here's a graph of construction employment right before the 7,600,000 workers is the number that were employed right before COVID. You could see the employment numbers drop as really pretty much construction in the Northeast came to a halt. Construction workers were considered essential in most of other states, and so it didn't fall to zero. But back last year, we exceeded the number of construction workers pre-COVID, and that trend has not stopped. Again, we're almost at 8 million workers currently working in the industry. And so longer hours mean harder on the body. And so we think there's continued physical and mental stress for skilled workers. The mental stress, if you go back to where the mega projects are located, they're transitory. They're having to travel, be away from their family. It's risky business. It's physically tough industry. And so mental stress is actually, even when a worker gets injured, there's some mental stress put on them because, believe it or not, they do want to go back to work, and their inability to be effective creates anxiety for them. And so we would say that the dynamics of the current state of the employment is that work comp accidents rates potentially increase with new and unskilled and inexperienced workers. There are studies to support this. And so if we've added close to 400,000 new workers prior to COVID, and we were having a heyday prior to COVID, we're going to see an increase in claims. Our term, we call it the tired worker. We'll put pressure on experience rating modification factors, or EMODs. And we're starting to see EMODs creep up anecdotally across our client base, in spite of the best risk prevention efforts going on. And so our IMA Construction and Loss Prevention Group has anticipated this trend, because we have looked at this data for the last 3 years in this way, and have developed several different strategic approaches utilizing data to really make meaningful impact above and beyond what is traditionally being done to prevent workers' injuries. So yes, the benefit of looking at this data does allow us to look ahead and start working on tools, and none other than the IMA Construction Loss Prevention Group has really taken to heart and is unveiling 3 new tools in the second half of this year. And then, sadly, construction worker suicide rates are 6 times greater than that of the average population. What IMA wants to do is create a mental fitness. How can we help our clients and their employees be mentally fit? That's less of a stigma of having a mental illness, and it's definitely incorporates, but is broader than suicide. And so what we really want to do is try to help our clients and their workers have a strong mental fitness, so that they're very alert and good at their job, but they also have quality of life. And quality of life hopefully puts less strain on having workers' compensation accidents, but it's just the right thing to do. So more to come from IMA as we take that on as our national initiative. All right, inflation, we've talked about it. The good news here is recently, in 1 month, it's basically flat. In a 12-month, it's down. But in, going back to 2020, we're still much higher. The one that we would point out to you is that construction machinery and equipment is, although it's flat for this month, it's not going down over the last 12 months. In fact, it's 8% higher. And so we would just bring this out to our construction clients to say, again, it is important to remember when it comes to property damage claims that the claim is valued at the time of loss. So whatever limits we had on the policy for a piece of construction equipment, just know that if those have not been adjusted recently, definitely within the last year, that in the event of a loss in this year's policy, that we could be underinsured. And so when you go out to try to replace your equipment with like, kind, and quality, that like, kind, and quality equipment is going to be more expensive than what you were able to obtain it for. And we may find ourselves in a difficult situation of not having enough insurance limits to pay for the damage. And so again, we're asking our construction clients and service teams to just take a close look at those limits and make sure that they're appropriate given our current state of the economy. And so so that's our current state. We're going to turn our attention to future state. And luckily, the industry has several factors that allow us to look at what we can expect going forward. One of which is backlog. Some people put this in the current state. We put it in the future state because it tells us, how much work is under contract still yet to be done. And the thing that pops out at us, not a surprise, is that that the backlogs for larger contractors are, higher than the average of 8.9 for the total economy, and that tells us that those jobs are bigger. That maybe it's not more number of projects that are under contract. It's just that the projects under contract are just more significant, and therefore there's more months of work to get those completed. So that does not surprise us given the mega project trend, given the fact that there's trillions of dollars just now starting to show up in the spending numbers. That does not surprise us. So we think of backlog as anything over 8 months is positive, that generally our contractors seem less anxious about the future when their backlogs are 8 months or higher. The trend we would notice from backlog data provided by the ABC is that the last 3 months have been flat. What does this mean? Does it mean that it's flattening out and will go down? It's too early to tell. But here we are in 3 months, and it's just flat. That's neither good nor bad. We're still at elevated levels, so we're taking the fact that there's future work to be had as a positive of the future. And then Construct Connect is a database of projects. They've recently created what's called the Project Stress Index. We like this index as it gives us insight into the quality of that backlog. Is it strong? Is it weak? Could it evaporate? Is it going to hold still? And the latest numbers from Construct Connect as of July 1st of this year is positive, that the number of jobs delayed or on hold is lower than it was a year ago, that although abandoned projects are higher than they were a year ago, they've been decreasing every week. And so that's a positive trend that no one really expected, especially in light of the rising interest rate environment. And so we're taking this data under Project Stress Index to say not only are there 9 months worth of work signed up for yet to be delivered, but that work is sitting on solid footing as of this data. So that's all positive. That tells us that there's future spending to be had in the upcoming, at least 9 months. We do believe, and we do credit Ed Zarinsky for helping us understand this greater. Although I've never met Ed. Ed Zarinsky was a lead estimator for a very large contractor in the Northeast. When he was the lead estimator, he published two Outlook twice a year, his view of the construction economy outlook. And it's predicated off, you got to have a construction start in order to have construction spending. And every project has its own, what I refer to as spending curve. Obviously, single family housing, once you announce the start, let's say there's $100 million of construction starts in residential. If that's single family housing, that residential spending curve could be 9 to 12 months. A commercial project probably follows more rule of thumb. This way, mega projects obviously would be spread out over many, many more years. But the point is that when we look at construction starts, then what is the timing of that construction spending flow after that project has started? And that gives us and then that feeds into what our current state of spending. So when we looked at our current state of spending, that we're over $1 trillion in non-residential spending, that's a direct result of all the different starts from really probably the prior 3 years. And so what happened 3 years ago is what projects got started 3 years ago now is showing up into what kind of spending we're starting to see in our current state. And here's a look. We're going to look at construction starts because that's going to give us an insight of what we can expect spending to be over the next 2 to 3 years. And so first thing we looked at, and we jump back to Construct Connect, although I believe Ed uses Dodge Analytics construction starts for his formulas. But we like this graph because it really tells us what we think is going on in the future. And we'll see it here in some actual numbers. But on a trailing 12-month basis, non-residential starts are starting to decline. And here we go with the heavy engineering, starting to incline. So we would say that again, that the money from all the congressional spending bills in 2021 are starting to show up in the spending numbers. And haven't shown up in the spending numbers, but starting to show up in construction starts. We did see them start showing up in the spending dollars, but this would suggest there's many more dollars to be had. Common sense would tell you that, but this statistic would prove it to you. Our concern is the non-residential building starts taking a 4-month decline. And you'll see this concern here, I believe, on this graph. So you'll see commercial starts for the first 5 months of this year are down 15%. So that would suggest that if we're starting 15% less volume through the first 5 months of 2023, then our spending in the future, our spending curve will go down for the future, and we'll have less spending over the next 2 to 3 years in the commercial sector. Conversely, if we look at non-residential building, it's down 7%. So again, our concern with really, I'm going to call it private sector spending, is that it's starting to show up in the lack of starts, which will show up in the lack of future spending. And if we look at institutional, and if we look at heavy engineering, civil actual percentages, you saw the trailing 12-month figures, they're up. And so again, this kind of feeds into the fact that we believe that the biggest owner in the next couple of years will be the government. And so contractors who serve that market will have a very fun time over the next couple of years. Those contractors that specialize in private spending projects, they'll still be spending. It's not drying up. It's just going to be, in our opinion, less. In this slide here, we do not get the multifamily breakout, and so we look at a different data point, and we're fortunate to get it from multifamilydive.com, where they've looked at some data from the U.S. Department of Housing and the U.S. Census Bureau, and starts this year are flat compared to where June over June data, but the permits in June 2023 are down a third where they were in 2022. So if the permits are down a third, that means we would have a third less starts coming up. We have to get permitted before we can start that project. And if the permits are down, then the starts are going to be down. That you could call this an early leading indicator. And so that is a concern for us in the apartment sector. So single family home builders continue to face headwinds due primarily to interest rates. The correlation is well established, but there are residential opportunities and build to rent. So investment groups building single-family homes strictly with the purpose to rent them, not sell them, continues to produce residential opportunities for our construction clients. And our read is that multifamily is experiencing good spending. You just saw it, 21% over where it was a year ago. But that is going to start to slow down. And I'll say the later part of 2023, that may not be entirely true, but definitely in 2024, I think we'll see apartments start to slow down. And that's driven by, and we'll look at the architectural billings index here in a second, but that's driven by the fact that our architects aren't drawing as many pictures, higher interest rates on construction loans, higher insurance costs. There's been several articles on how higher insurance costs are impacting the pro forma. It's not penciling out. And then, what's not being discussed on really a level that we think it should is that the regional banks are really scrutinizing their commercial loans, and we're starting to see a silent pullback in that. So multifamily is doing well. Again, we saw it in the numbers. But when we add in the fact that permits are down so far in June, a third from where they were a year ago, to the fact that we have all these other headwinds facing us, we're really bleak on apartment construction, even though the demand is there. And people, and we have the complete shortage of living quarters for people. But the economics of it, there's just a lot of headwinds there. If we sticking with starts, which tells us the future state, here's some more data from Construct Connect, and you can just see this is the heavy engineering civil. This is where you can already see where some of that money's flowing. California is up in heavy engineering civil starts by 60%. Texas, look how big Texas is in their construction starts. Through the first 5 months, they're up 26%. You can see it across the board. Massachusetts is up 115. Alaska, which ranks 7th in amount of construction start spending for heavy engineering. So it's not a small base. It's just seeing tremendous opportunities. And so we, again, tying construction starts to spending, we would see spending in these states to be higher over the next several years due to the fact that there's so much projects being started now. If we shift out of that public, if we shift into the non-residential, again, Texas is at 26% up in heavy engineering. They're 25% down in non-residential. We look at this as more of a private sector play. And, this gives us concern, again, going back to the construction starts by category, not just by state, of our concern about private sector spending going forward. And again, our contractors that typically play in that space, that gives us concern about their prospects over really 2024, maybe early 2025. And those are just some highlights of significant. Our 3 largest states, Texas, California, and Florida, have negative private sector spending starts through the first 5 months. And so, again, contractors who play in that area, again, construction spending is not going to dry up. It's still significant. There'll still be projects out there. It's just at what rate will we be able. Construct Connect also does what they call an expansion index. They look at total value of projects being planned last year compared to total projects being planned to this year, and they calculate a formula, a ratio, and if it's over 2.0, then it's a positive expansion. If it's yellow, it's still going up. It's just not at a super fast rate. And then if it's under 1, then obviously the planning prospect would say that no one's expanding in that area. And so as you can see, we do have some green, but we're pretty much positively flat with more red than I think anyone would care to see. So just a graphic representation of really what's on the planning table around the country. And it's yellow to red, quite honestly. And then a lot of people look at the Architectural Billing Index. We do too. Our read on this is if you're not familiar with the Architectural Billing Index, it reads like this. It says the AIA, a great organization, surveys their members on a monthly basis. They ask the question, are you billing more this month than you did last month? And if so, to what degree? And if the answer is yes, then it's over 50. The index is set at 50. And if the answer is no, I'm not billing more this month than last month, then that number is going to be under 50, and to what degree you see the numbers. Here's the concerning thing for the ABI for us. For 9 months, we've hovered around yes and no. Never really high like we were in summer and fall of 2022, but 9 months in a row, we've just been kind of floating along, really more negative than positive. And so if the architects are not drawing 30% plans or giving pretty pictures to owners of which to figure out how to move forward, then we're not going to have a construction start. And if we don't have a construction start, we're not going to have construction spending. So this too is a leading indicator. I believe 9 to 12 months before the construction start, not before the construction spending, but to get to the construction start. And so our leading indicator here just suggests that we have 9 months of ho-hum, and that eventually will show up in the construction spending. And then maybe the one exception when you break out the AIA is this upward trend here in 2023 and a little bit before that the architects are working on more institutional projects than they are residential and commercial and industrial, which again supports our concern about private sector spending in the future. So what does that mean overall? So in short, non-residential spending is up over last year. We will finish out 2023 in a positive environment, but we start seeing cracks occurring in 2024, and that will put pressure on, for us and the insurance carriers, the rating basis, the number of autos, the number of payroll, the number of sales, number of contract values, the number of builders risks. But what does it mean for our construction clients? Multifamily building, although it is up 21% year over year today, we do see the signs of weakness. You saw the permit decrease. You're seeing the construction start decrease. I did not show Dodge Analytics data for residential, but that is a decreased, that's a negative number. We're starting to see more money flowing to the larger general contractors who can bond and handle the larger jobs as a result of congressional spending. We think if you're a contractor in street and road and water sewer projects and that sort of engineered projects, you're going to continue to have several years of great runway ahead of you. We're concerned that the commercial starts are down 15% through the first 5-6 months of 2023. That means there's going to be less projects occurring and definitely less spending to occur once those projects that are not occurring, those cash flow schedules are not going to flow as well. And again, we said it just recently, the fact that the architects have not been working on significantly increasing more work for the last 9 months gives us serious concern about spending. Again, not through 2023, probably not through first part of 2024, but eventually the lack of planning, the lack of designs, the lack of starts will show up in the lack of spending. And I'm going to draw our attention back to Ed Zirinsky, and I highly encourage you to go to his webpage, edzirinsky.com. You can see it in the bottom right-hand corner. Have had the privilege of following Ed since 2007. One of the things that I appreciate about Ed's insights and him putting out his forecasts is he goes back in time and assesses his accuracy compared to other organizations. And time again, he is, I will just say it for him, he is probably the most accurate. And again, I think it's due to his longevity as a lead estimator for a very large contractor, but also his insights into how really it all flows through from an idea in an owner's head to the time that the last check is cut. But looking at Ed's updated forecast for May, so year to date spending, total construction's up 2.9%. Ed figures that'll be 4.9 before we're all said and done. Non-residential, we're down 9.9%. And I'm sorry, residential, we're down almost 10% year to date. We saw that, right? Maybe the timing of the numbers. Our numbers were of June. Ed's numbers is as of as of May, but it was 10.8% negative through June, and that's going to continue and be at negative 7.3%. Compared, so that's 860 million spending rate compared to the 927 where we finished 2022. And then non-building infrastructure, here we go. We finished at 372 billion at the end of 2022. We're going to project to be 423 and then 470 at a very, very early forecast for 2024. And so one of the things I would point out about the 2024 early forecast, just looking at our non-residential buildings, is, we're going to be at 19.6% from where we finished 2022. But again, they'll be spending. It just won't be at a higher rate in 2024 as it was. And that's a function of those declining or those negative construction start data we see. This is the impact that we will see as a result of those negative construction start data through the first 5 and 6 months of this year. Again, we're at 679 forecasted for non-residential construction. Is still way higher than where we finished 2022, and will just be a significantly higher than where it's estimated where we'll finish 2023. It's just the rate is going to be a lot, not at the breakneck speed that we've enjoyed for the last 2 years. And again, looking at those construction starts as it shows up in Ed Zielinski's initial 2024 forecast, there you can start seeing some impact there. And then manufacturing in early 2024 being down. That may or may not be true. It will be for me to argue with Ed, but we, those projects have started. I think because of lack of skilled labor, I think those projects are taking longer than expected. So I think the spending curve will go out a little bit longer than maybe normal, which may or may not be contemplated in the algorithms. But I will tell you this, again, here we're starting to see the spending for our infrastructure bills. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and listening to the pieces of the economic puzzle that we put on the table to form our picture and some of the insights that we try to glean. There's many, many more. It's client specific. But if you have a comment, question, feel free to reach out to me or your IMA service member or producer, and we'll be happy to talk with you, get your insights, get your opinions, and hopefully you found some of this information valuable for you. So thank you, everybody, and until next time.